Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is February 29, that fake day that gets added to the calendar every few years. And we are recording live, twitch.tv/socialism S4A. And there's about 40 people in the chat right now. Welcome to everybody. Reminder, don't feed the troll, just point them out to a mod. Otherwise, it clogs up the chat. I really do like to read through the whole chat. And, if people are just fighting with trolls, it doesn't really work. Slows things down, and then there's long pauses as I kind of try to parse through the comments. Anyway, before we do anything else today, and I have a ton of articles I want to catch up on, let's thank the patrons. So patreon.com/socialismforall and buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. If you'd like to get your name on the screen like these fine folks. Names that are in colors have been supporting for more than a year. Yellow names over 1 year, green names over 2 years, blue names, or I guess that's teal, over 3 years. We'll be hitting, I think it's in August, we hit our first, I'm still trying to decide on the next color. I'm thinking it's purple, I'm not sure. But anyway, we'll be seeing some of these folks, I think, hitting their 4th year of support, or entering their 4th year of support. Wow. So, yeah. Really appreciate the support. This channel is non-commercial. We don't run ads, and I think that that's not appropriate. We don't do sponsorships for a communist channel. Instead, it is viewer supported, and we are just trying to create resources for the movement so that people can get better educated, try to further the dialogue and discussion. It's been interesting. We recently had the 4th birthday of the channel, entering the 5th year of doing the channel here. And it's been quite a journey. When I started out, I was familiar with some basic Marxism, labor versus capital, that kind of thing, and like a tiny bit of history of the USSR. But beyond that, I had studied the US labor movement. I didn't really know that much about the international communist movement and its roughly 175 years of history since the Communist Manifesto. And so I've learned a lot, and I think in the beginning of doing this channel, I think came to it with a lot of blind hope and eagerness, having recently come out of more of an ANCOM type of phase and realized that had some severe limitations, which actually have been addressed in Marxism since Marx and Engels' time. Reading more Marx and Engels helped me to see that, I'm not the first person that realized the problems with anarchism. They were talking about that all the way back in the beginning. And the problem was that Marxism, and especially Marxism-Leninism, has been overtaken pretty much entirely by revisionism, which we define as the entrance of capitalist or bourgeois ideas in the communist movement. So you get the communist movement, which is supposed to be the vanguard of the working class, and getting totally weighed down with capitalist ideology in one way or another. And that goes back to the beginning when people would come in with, quote, improvements on Marxism, and then they would actually revise key features of it with capitalist ideology, like the need for revolution, for example. And you can look at works like Rosa Luxemburg's Reform or Revolution for more on that. Anyway, by the time that, I was getting involved in this in the 21st century, the Marxism-Leninism that was around, by and large, is, pretty poisoned by revisionism. And the extent to which that was the case, I really wasn't prepared for. And then especially halfway through now, about 2 years ago, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and then literally half of the supposed Marxist-Leninists supported Russia in that, denying that Russia is an imperialist country, etc. It's just, the mask really came off. And I was already in 2020 and 2021 astounded by the amount of revisionism there, and just kind of like out-and-out fascism that's trying to pass itself off as Marxism-Leninism, which has nothing to do with fascism. Actual Marxism-Leninism has nothing to do with that. It's completely opposed to it. But it has been so distorted in the latter half of the 20th century in particular, that no one would know that now. Anyway, already being somewhat floored by that, Then the Russia-Ukraine thing 2 years ago, that was staggering to me. I mean, staggering. When I was not supporting that war on the basis that it was an inter-imperialist conflict, which, from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Therefore, when imperialists fight, just when imperialists exist, they have nothing more to contribute to historical development. The only thing after that would represent any progress is socialism, a social revolution. So when imperialists fight, the only thing that Marxist-Leninists do is to focus on social revolution and organizing for that, because it's the only thing that represents any progress. At a certain point, a bourgeois peace may make sense, but it's only just a temporary pause before that starts up again, because the imperialists will fight for control over resources and etc. And eventually you're going to come back around to that question of social revolution. But the people just twisting themselves into pretzels on the Russia isn't imperialist thing. I mean, Lenin was talking about how it was imperialist in his time. Then it went beyond into socialism and then suffered a counter-revolution and came back. Of course it's at that level of development. And you can see that with Russia's foreign direct investment outflows. They were investing in many other countries. That has been curtailed by the sanctions and things. But I mean, they're an imperialist country. They're at the highest stage of capitalism. It's dominated by monopolies and all the other features of imperialism, as Lenin showed. So that was staggering to see that the, quote, Marxist-Leninist community was this opportunist. And, there's the question of China as well. We've been taking that on more recently. But I'm kind of in a point now, starting the 5th year, where it's just like, we need to focus on anti-revisionist education. Because I've been just floored, to one degree or another, by the depth of revisionism in the movement. And, you see the anarchists, you see the soc Dems, you see the other sort of left trends out there. Those don't represent real viable options. So it's not like we can just go start working with those people instead again and build a political movement based on anarchism or something. We need to rebuild and reconstitute the Marxist-Leninist organizations, and we need to build a party. Building a party is a thing that is a lot of hard work, and you have to guard it, and you have to take care to protect the party on its, as it's forming and everything. This is no small feat, but it really does have to be done. So for the time being, we are focusing on the anti-revisionist education as well as Marxist fundamentals. And anyway, just a lot of thanks to the supporters who are, still supporting the channel, not opportunist, didn't get peeled off by all the right-wing bullshit. And it's been, like I said, when I came into this, I came in pretty naive and wide-eyed about, I'm going to learn a lot here and there's going to be people. I'll tell you something, starting in 2024, there are very, very, very few media outlets that call themselves communists that I really have any regard for, really. So, I don't know. We may see some, like a new... when I started doing the channel, I was coming more from a place of like, the Bernie primaries were going. We're getting some actual traction in the left on that basis, that Bernie Sanders was talking about socialism and all that kind of stuff. And I think what he was talking about was a bit different from what we would be talking about. But it got a lot of people interested. And I know some of the early listeners of this channel were people who were interested in learning about actual socialism, having been exposed through that. And so, we do the reading, we do some teaching, some actual educational work, and trying to get people grounded in the real thing here. That's what we're trying to do, so that at some point this movement becomes capable of building that actual party, free of revisionism, free of the mental gymnastics, etc. But yeah, like I said, I came in really just kind of naive about what I was going to find, and now it's just, I don't know, it's just shocking to me. And again, we'll be focusing on the kind of educational campaigns that I've been talking about. But it's just really in a super different place from where I started out. And, that's learning and growth, but it's also the scales being removed from my eyes about, the Marxist-Leninist movement as it is today. Anyway, I think I abandoned a train of thought in there somewhere, but that'll have to suffice for an opening monologue for now. I know what I was going to say, is we may be starting another round of reaction videos. As I was saying when I started the channel, coming more from that kind of, watching more SOCDEM type channels, the Kyle Kalinskis and whatever, because that was really dominant, and that had kind of culminated in the Bernie Sanders campaign. Okay. So, I did some hanging with the SOCDEM gang videos, which people liked. I eventually got to a point where I just couldn't do them, even if I was paid directly, like $100 to do each video. I was just getting to a point where I couldn't watch them anymore. They were that bad. But I think that I may be doing another round, and I'm talking to some people about collaborating on notes for these. But doing another round of reaction videos, more directed toward criticism of revisionism within the communist, at least media sphere. I don't know if movement is really even the word. I was talking to somebody the other day about, the communist movement on Twitter, and it's like, to what extent can you even call this the communist movement? It's just idiots on a website, So, anyway. All right, who's in the chat? 54 viewers. Welcome, everyone. And do we have any mods here yet today? I'm not sure. Let me just post a message. Don't feed the trolls. Tag a mod instead. Keep chat clean. And then we got Shakespeare. We got Health Revolt. We got Brit. Okay, there we go. And let's actually post that. That's why I pressed enter. I will pin that in just a second. Wow, there's a lot of chat already. Pinning. No, if this channel were for sale, believe me, it would be making a lot more money. That's not what I'm trying to do, though. Who are you talking about? No analysis of settler colonialism. I was disappointed. Who are you talking about? I missed the beginning of this conversation. Some more news video. Oh, I'm not even sure. Is that the guy with the tie? What am I thinking of? Centrism is a cowardly position that possesses zero moral or ideological power. I mean, it's basically just status quo, moderate status quo people. And by the way, I don't mean my comment about the fake day to come off as anti-fake day. I'm totally pro-fake day. I guess technically leap day, but yeah. Am I planning to cover the KKE's disappointing homophobic statement a while back during the previous parliamentary vote on same-sex marriage? Yeah, actually, I had forgotten about that. As I was just saying in the opening about the head-spinning revisionism, it's like there were some lesser-known parties that I was starting to look at, and then literally half of those crapped out, too. So yeah, there was KKE shit. What's it called now? ComAct. Let me look up the website again. European Communist Action. Eurcomact.org. EURCOMACT.org. I was going to cover this, and then it was just like, at a certain point, I just can't anymore. It's like I just have to conserve energy to pick battles one at a time. But it said, we intensify the struggle for women's emancipation against the EU and the system of capitalist exploitation and imperialist wars. I mean, sounds good, but then there was stuff about this, about like the traditional family and all this reactionary bullshit. So yeah, it's like there were a number of organizations. Politsturm was one of these. Well, Politsturm actually I think is a glorified YouTube channel with a few attached study groups. They're less of a party or organization than I thought they were. But yeah, KKE too, that was not supporting the war in Ukraine, and so I assumed was, were better Marxist-Leninists, and then they get in on that stuff too. So, yeah, I mean, I might cover that in more detail. I kind of hit a point this winter where it was just like, I'm just fucking tired, you know? And still going, but man, I'm at sort of a low point currently for energy. And like I said, talking to some people about maybe working on some reaction videos to other stuff. Just get some fun going again. I mean, we're gonna cover some crazy depressing stuff in the stories right now. Like the work must go on, and I'm committed to it. But holy shit, has it been just challenging? But anyway, yes, thank you for congrats on the 4 years. I appreciate it. I feel the final force to be mobilized against socialism will be the police and the military, of course. Yeah, a possible solution could be starting a movement within the states which militantly opposed patriotism. Well, so then they elaborate, confronting patriots with the horrors of their country, specifically trying to get as many military and police to switch sides in order to help our odds down the line. Is this naive? What are other ways to take power from the military and police? No, you absolutely do need military and, you know, former military and police to support a revolutionary movement. It is very important. And yeah, getting people more aware of what the country is actually about, what the country is actually doing, and how you would need to significantly, in a revolutionary way, change course on that to where, you know, what is today called the United States would probably have to be changed into something unrecognizable as the United States. That would be my assessment of where that would have to be headed. But actually, you know, an example of that, I'll start trickling in articles here as we go, is people may have heard about the former armed forces personnel, Aaron Bushnell, who self-immolated in front of, I believe it was in front of the Israeli embassy in protest. And here's a thing from the NewYorker.com. Aaron Bushnell's act of political despair. It isn't despair, it's protest. But anyway, quoting, Aaron Bushnell's final message on Facebook read, quote, many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now. Because, yeah, it's doing those things. And Gaza is one example, but I mean, the horrors that the U.S. is committing, I mean, it's sort of a very long list. So anyway, it's going down. Shared some news also that people are trying to smear Aaron Bushnell as far as being like a Jew-hating person. This is completely fake, though, and there is a link that they provided. I'll give you the headline. So there's a Daily Dot article. The headline is, did Aaron Bushnell call for death to all Jews on a Reddit? And no, he didn't. And you see fake down at the bottom. I'm not a big fan of Snopes. I think that they do a lot of really crappy work. But even they said that that was fake. So, yeah, that's not true if you hear people spreading shit about Aaron Bushnell. And the Zionists are very concerned about that. They're very terrified about that. And so they're having to do op-eds like stop glorifying self-immolation. I don't know, stop papering over a genocide. How about that? So, yeah. I have a lot of articles actually about the kind of pushback that Joe Biden is getting on this. Let's do a little of that right now. Let me just see, what did I save this as? I was planning on getting into this a little bit later. So first of all, here's an article, and I'm probably going to have to just do headlines on a lot of these. This is from Middle East Monitor. Quote, genocide without any doubt in Gaza, says UN Special Rapporteur. This is from 2 weeks ago. So yeah, what Israel is doing is genocide. So ethnic cleansing, you may be familiar with that. You know, the forced relocation, the destruction of housing. I mean, it's a systematic campaign of extermination so that Israel can go open settlements there later. That's what it's about. So yeah, this is a genocide. So how is the ruling party in the United States responding to this? Well, So Pelosi was out there claiming that no U.S. weapons have been used to carry out Israeli atrocities in Gaza. So that's actually incorrect. That is not factual. And so the article continues. And so Pelosi was asked, if you don't like what Israel is doing, and the president has made it clear that some of what Israel is doing he doesn't like, and you go on supplying them with hardware to do these things, then you own this operation every bit as much as they do. Don't you, like, take some responsibility here? And she said, quote, Pelosi said, quote, no, we don't. We don't. We have always supported Israel as our national security friend, largely because it was in our interest to do so. We had shared values. It's the only democracy in the region. The behavior of Netanyahu is, in my view, inexcusable, blah, blah, blah. And she says, there's nothing we have sent since October 7th that has contributed to this brutality. Wow. So, however, the article continues, the United States government sends Israel more than $3.8 billion in military aid every year, and Biden is pushing Congress to approve another $14 billion for the country. A February 17 Wall Street Journal report cites unnamed U.S. officials who say that the U.S. is preparing to send Israel more bombs and weapons in the coming days, and then they list some of the details of what is in that proposed package there. And however, an Amnesty International investigation from last December found that U.S.-made munitions killed 43 civilians in 2 Israeli airstrikes days after October 7th. So yeah, that is continuing. But I think that more to the point, the U.S. just vetoed the 3rd resolution calling for a ceasefire. And also, they are directly militarily enabling this. See how U.S. Navy ships in the Mediterranean are positioned to support Israel. So this is from back in October, but after the current phase of everything started. So the U.S. is parking Navy ships around Israel. Why? Specifically to deter any other countries from getting the idea that, they could start more of a regional war to stop what Israel's doing. It says right here, quote, their mission, as stated by the DoD, is not to let the neighbors join the party. So it's a show of force. And Peter Daly, a retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral and CEO of the U.S. Naval Institute, said, as laid out by the Secretary of Defense, their guidance, the guidance for the 14 ships parked off of Israel's coast, is, they're not just off of Israel's coast, but they include ones parked off of Israel's coast. The guideline is to make sure that there's no escalation around Israel. In other words, the U.S. warships are shielding Israel from any other interventions from any other country that might roll up tanks or fighter jets or whatever and say, hey, stop doing a genocide. So this is the actual state of things, and the Democrats really think that in the age of the internet, they can just gaslight people and just claim that things that are happening are not happening. And then that takes us up to today with the flour bag massacre. Now, if you haven't been on the news at all today, this is like just happening, I think. So this is a headline, dozens killed by Israeli fire in Gaza while collecting food aid. More than 100 were killed and about 750 Palestinians were wounded after Israeli forces fired at Palestinians trying to get flour for their families as famine stalks the strip. The Israeli offensive forces fired tanks into this group of starving people who were clamoring for food and lining up to get it. Why? Because they were, quote, making them feel unsafe. So Biden the other day was talking about how he was, and the ice cream PR stunt where he's standing there eating some ice cream. He said that a ceasefire was in the works and, would probably be rolled out next week. Well, they have walked that back now. So this is an Axios story. Biden says that the, quote, Gaza aid convoy incident will complicate hostage talks. President Biden told reporters Thursday that he, quote, knows the aid convoy incident in Gaza, in which dozens of Palestinians were killed, will complicate the negotiations over a hostage deal and a temporary ceasefire. So again, if the U.S. yanked support for this, it would be over. It is the U.S. which is enabling this. It's funding it. It's arming it. It is protecting it militarily with warships, and diplomatically or politically at the international level, they are vetoing anything that could get in Israel's way at all. So Biden, who also walked back his previous remarks about a possible ceasefire in Gaza by Monday, spoke to reporters shortly after a phone call with the Emir of Qatar. A source with knowledge of the call said Biden and the Qatari Emir spoke about the hostage talks that have taken place in Doha in the last few days. Biden also spoke to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Egypt and Qatar are mediating the indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas. And again, it's always Hamas. It's not the Palestinian government, etc. There are questions about the legitimacy of Hamas as far as the ruling party in Gaza, because if you look up in 2006, 2007, there was basically a mini war between Hamas and Fatah. And so, like, the PFLP, for example, doesn't consider there to be a legitimate government because there haven't been elections in 15 years and that whole thing. But they always portray it as Hamas, where that is right now the default government. And, you know, if you talk to people on the ground, who are they mad at? Is it Hamas or is it Israel and Israel's enablers? So anyway, Biden and Sisi, quote, grieved the loss of civilian lives and agreed that this incident underscored the urgency of bringing negotiations to a close as soon as possible and expanding the flow of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, the White House said in a readout. So, I don't know. You know, there's new developments on this constantly. That article does go on. But, you know, that happened just today. And I don't know. This government just doesn't give a shit about anything. Which leads us into actually the next thing about there was a sort of domestic political stunt where people went to the Michigan primary, Democratic Party primary, and 21% of the people voted uncommitted. And so you got this dipshit, Walter Shapiro, posting on Blue Sky and has a newrepublic.com article. The media is overhyping the, quote, uncommitted threat to Biden. I'm sorry, but when 21% of the people who show up to your primary do so, they have no hope of winning anything in particular, not supporting a candidate. 1 in 5 people showed up just to say, fuck you, Joe Biden is shit. I mean, I would maybe, you know, I mean, that's a lot of motivation to do that. But the Democratic Party, they just keep treating the average American as, like, the enemy. And so you get people writing stuff like this, and this is even somebody else. More than 100,000 Michigan voters pick uncommitted over Biden. Does that matter for November? It's just like, how long can we just ignore what people want? And basically indefinitely. Because as this article concludes, and there's a really kind of, I think, unintentionally hilarious thing at the end here. Is it on this screen? Well, anyway, so what they end with here, selecting uncommitted is a way for voters to express dissatisfaction with the candidates whose names appear on the ballot while still participating in the democratic act of voting. Yeah, they showed up to the party's primary and said, we hate your candidate. In my view, this form of peaceful protest is an essential element. They're paying lip service to, like, this is fine. It is not an option for the fall general election, where the only alternative to a Biden vote for Democrats will be to stay home or vote for Donald Trump or vote for another candidate, but that doesn't exist in your universe. Given his past record and proposals to exclude Arabs from immigration to the United States, I don't believe that staying home or voting for Trump will be a realistic alternative for many of Michigan's uncommitted voters. This is a research professor at the Center for Political Studies at the University of Michigan. So literally, he's just saying, where are you going to go? You don't realistically have anywhere to go. And actually, just backing that one up a second before I go on to the next thing. Was it in this article? Yeah, here we go. It's not clear that all of the uncommitted voters were part of the protest. In primaries, some voters will vote uncommitted if they have not yet made their choice or they don't want to disclose that for any number of reasons. In 2020, 19,000 Democratic voters in Michigan selected uncommitted, so a comparable, not a comparable number. This is 100,000. So anyway, that's way less, while 21,000 did so in 2016. Yeah, did I have this right? Let me just double check that. It's 100,000 people, right? So that would be 5 times as many. This is like one of these like questioning my sanity moments. Yeah, more than 100,000. So like, well, 20,000 did. It doesn't mean anything. But this is the level of spin and gaslighting and just fucking bullshit. Lies. These are the lies that they sell to you in so many different ways. But anyway, yeah, that's like head spinning because, 20,000 people voted that way before, and that didn't mean anything. Well, this is 5 times bigger than that. But anyway, continuing on the Michigan thing, this is the listentomichigan.com campaign to vote uncommitted. So the Biden campaign finally responded to the large amount, 21% of uncommitted votes. That's why I was getting them confused, because it's 21% versus 21,000 votes. I was like, wait a minute. No, okay. Biden campaign co-chair Mitch Landrieu finally responded to Listen to Michigan's uncommitted campaign, stating, so this is the Biden campaign co-chair, quote, "We're going to continue to talk to them and then ask them to think about the choices and what the consequences are about electing somebody who wants to have a Muslim ban." Wow. So apparently Michigan has one of the biggest Arab American contingents that there is, and they usually vote Democrat. And so he's literally saying to them, like, yeah, you don't like that we're enabling a genocide, but what are you going to do? Trump's going to ban you from the country. They're really leaning into that 99% Hitler versus 100% Hitler thing. So this is where we're at. The Democrats are just literally like, we are the lesser evil, deal with it. Wow. So if you haven't already detached from this party and recognized that this party is an imperialist party, it's been around since 1828, it's not really interested in doing anything for you, it's interested in maintaining U.S. imperialism and continuing to expand it and to oppress and exploit you, that's what the Democratic Party is, along with the Republican Party, part of a system. Okay, it's good cop, bad cop. They work together for the same purpose, busting you. That's what this is about. If you haven't realized that by now, please open your eyes. This isn't just about Biden. This is a long-term, centuries-old campaign to just keep expanding capitalism and crushing the working class. And occasionally, like there was for a very brief window of a couple of decades, they did the New Deal under FDR. First of all, under enormous pressure. But second of all, they did that to save capitalism, and they basically said as much. And if you read the National Labor Relations Act, for example, it says right in there that certain capitalists were being obstinate and threatening the entire system by not dealing fairly with unions. So we're doing this law to make sure that they don't tank the entire system and cause a revolution. So that's what the Democratic Party is about. There's just nothing for you there as a working class person. I mean, and then along these lines, this was some stuff left over from last week. Joe Biden weighs invoking his executive authority to stage a border crackdown ahead of the 2024 elections. So, I mean, getting into this article a little bit here, tell me how this is significantly better than the Republicans. And I don't just mean that in a static sense. People will put them side by side and go, okay, well, they are 1% better than the Republicans. I'll take 99% Hitler. History is a moving target, okay? History is not a static thing. Things keep rolling on. So here's the question that I'd like to ask you, and then I'd like you to ask yourself. Where, if you support this over time, do we end up? Does this really effectively oppose the Republican Party by just being 1% or 5% better than they are, even if you think it's bigger, 20%, 30% better? The Republican Party keeps getting worse, yet they're not really winning. Again, the Democrats are not winning against them. The Republican Party keeps going further and further to right and maintaining their presence in the government. So things as a whole it's not working. It's not getting better. You can vote Democrat all night and day, The Democratic Party is not an anti-fascist party. They are part of a fascist system which is going into more and more crisis and cracking down more and more. And this has been happening over decades. And so if you keep voting Democrat, it's just, you're going to see the same overall trajectory. The government could be 100% Democrats. They're not going to substantially change anything. And the conditions will still be ripe for the Republican Party to come right back. So that's what I'm saying is, like, where does this get us over time? So anyway, President Biden is debating whether to invoke a sweeping presidential authority that gained infamy during the Trump administration to stage a crackdown on migrants coming to the U.S. southern border. Three people familiar with the plans told CBS News. He is weighing citing a law dating back to 1952 to severely restrict access to the U.S. asylum system, which is buckled under the weight of record levels of migrant arrivals along the border with Mexico, the sources said, requesting anonymity to discuss internal government deliberations. That law, known as 212F, allows the president to, quote, suspend the entry of foreigners when it is determined that their arrival is not in the best interest of the country. The Trump administration used that law several times, including to ban immigration and travel from certain countries, most of them predominantly Muslim, and to bar migrants from asylum if they entered the country unlawfully. So you got Biden contemplating doing the exact same thing. Go back again to that Listen to Michigan quote, where the guy's like, well, what are you going to do? Vote for Trump? He's talking about a Muslim ban. Well, fucking Biden's thinking about, like, using the same law. How are we substantially better off? And again, it's not just about whether in the moment you think that there is some gain or, you know, some improvement by going with the Democrats. It's that even when you get Democrats, you're still going to be worse off 5 years from now than you were before. And it's going to keep going like that forever. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. So things keep getting worse even when you vote Democrat. So if you accept that the two major parties are both imperialist parties working hand in glove with each other, or even if you don't accept that part, it's true, but even if you don't accept it, then just look at it. They're functionally, and they have complete dominance of the U.S. government, these two parties, and things keep going in the same direction, no matter who's in office. Really, over time, it's the same trend. And the Democratic Party is not apparently interested in doing anything significant that could actually crush the Republican Party. In fact, the top Democratic Party leadership keeps saying we need a strong Republican Party. So you have to look beyond these two parties if you want anything to change. And you might be saying, well, but the electoral system, the way that it is like really heavily biased against any other party. Yeah, I agree. The entire system needs to go. What I'm telling is you need to look beyond this entire system. Remember, politics is the concentrated essence of economic interests. The economics, that's the basis of it all. The politics is the reflection of different class interests, and the Republican and Democratic parties don't represent the working class. So to get a political movement that actually does represent working class interests, you have to look beyond these parties toward the creation of an entirely different system that doesn't resemble this one at all. In fact, you have to get rid of this one and then put a completely new system built from the ground up in its place. And that might seem daunting to you, and it might seem intimidating, but we can do it if we work together and we stop making excuses for, oh, do we want we're on a sinking ship. Do we want it to sink at, 3 feet per hour or 1.5 feet per hour when, even if you get the extra time, you're not using it to get off the ship? Okay, it's a sinking ship. Both parties represent a sinking ship. One is just sinking maybe a little bit more slowly than the other, but they're committed to taking turns with the other party that it's going to sink faster under. So do you want to be on the sinking ship party bandwagon, or do you want to get onto we have to get off of the ship and do something else? We need to be building a life raft now and get to shore and then go live our lives. That's what we're talking about here. You have to get out of the system entirely. All right, they just don't give a fuck about you. So anyway, here's a good example of that, actually, thanks to a Blue Sky poster for this. Couple of headline examples. DNC committee, Democratic National Committee, blocks Medicare for all from even being considered. Meanwhile, a new poll shows that nearly 90% of Democratic voters support Medicare for all. Right. So you've got something that the overwhelming majority, I think it was only 8% of the Democratic Party base, actually opposed Medicare for all. Yet for some reason, it's that 8% that gets represented in the DNC policy. Then below, Democrats vote against including marijuana legalization in 2020. Meanwhile, same thing, 90% of Americans say that marijuana or cannabis should be legalized for medical or recreational use, poll suggests. And by now, cannabis has been legalized, decriminalized in many different states. The sky has not fallen. So yeah, 91% of Americans say that marijuana or cannabis should be legalized for medical and recreational use, poll suggests. So here's another one about how far behind the DNC is. This is from Sludge. The DNC is still contracting with firms that fight against unions. We're in 2024. Labor unions sought to pressure the DNC into banning anti-union vendors in 2022, but a review of FEC, Federal Election Committee disbursements data, reveals that the party group is still paying millions of dollars to firms that offer union avoidance services. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't represent labor. They represent the 1%. I mean, they've been talking about card check, for example, forever, which would make forming a labor union much simpler, more streamlined process if you get 50% plus one of workers in a proposed bargaining unit saying that they want to unionize at the time of the sign-up for the authorization cards or A cards, then you can just bypass the election, because if the election was held that day, it would pass. They won't even do fucking card check. They've been talking about it forever. So, yeah, they don't care about you. They don't care about labor. They work for the 1%. I mean, and all of the kind of stuff about, oh, if Trump gets elected, there may never be another election again. Would it matter at this point? Because neither party actually listens to anyone. So, you know, as Marxists, we do want to support the expansion of bourgeois liberties as much as possible, as much as realistically possible, because why? What are we interested in? Intensifying the class struggle. So, to the extent that expanded civil liberties allow for an intensified class struggle, that can be helpful. But I don't know. I don't know. You know, like I said, I'm tired. I've been doing this for over 4 years now. I mean, and only 4 years. It's only been 4 years. I'm fucking exhausted because it's just like having come to a lot of these conclusions myself and then finding supporting literature and historical evidence for yeah, this is correct. I just don't know why people are so fucking stubborn and so resistant to just seeing reality on this. And, you know, I guess this leads me into something else, which I found an article in the most unlikely of places, actually. So this is on ratemds.com. All right, it's sort of like Yelp for doctors. And the title of this article is Childhood Trauma is Linked to Environmentalism as an Adult. And so this came out last year. And so what this article is basically saying is that people who experience trauma actually seem to show increased empathy and civic engagement in the long run after they have, like, you know, if the trauma doesn't claim their life, and they do recover from it, they come back a stronger, more empathetic, and socially conscious person. So, public engagement and early experiences. A study done by researchers at the University of Colorado at Boulder surveyed 450 American adults. Their goal was to examine people who engage in civic causes and display, quote, green behavior. Civic engagement was measured in how many hours participants devoted to environmental protection causes each month. This included also writing letters to officials, donating time and resources to organizations, as well as personal habits. Although personal habits doesn't go super... What we need to do is take control of production and change that, like shorter showers and that kind of thing doesn't really do that much for the environment, because the biggest polluters are corporations and the military. So yeah. But the study found that people who had experienced childhood trauma were more likely to engage in both private green behavior and public environmental engagement. It isn't known why trauma at a young age can result in this, really, but some researchers feel it may have to do with developing a stronger sense of empathy. Quote, it suggests that there could be another way of looking at trauma, said the study's lead author. Yeah. So most of the people, and I've discussed this before, most of the people who get involved in a socialist movement and left politics generally are people who have been thrown away by society or suffered some kind of trauma to the point where they realize that this system doesn't work for them and that the people who run it are fucking psychopathic shitheads who would just sell the entire planet for enough money, you know, if they got the right offer on it. And yeah, so it's like people who are in marginalized and oppressed groups a lot of times are more likely to have these realizations and have the kinds of mental breakthroughs that lead to developing social consciousness, and who do the math in their head about, you know, walking down the different logic flowcharts of how do we get change, what will actually work, what does history show, and they become a socialist. And so, yeah, definitely people who experience trauma much more likely to see through the bullshit. And, you know, this is also like people who've dealt with narcissistic abuse and who have been gaslit on a personal level, whether it was in a relationship, like a romantic relationship or a friendship, or a toxic family system. And, you know, there can be narcissists that hijack family systems as well. People who've confronted that in their private life on the micro level, I think that a lot of those lessons do translate to the macro, larger society, because we're all just human beings in the end. A lot of that stuff does transfer out into the sociological domain. If you're able to confront an abuser and usurper, you know, and sort of deal with that and overcome that on a small scale, you might start recognizing those same patterns on a macro scale. But just kind of funny to see that popping up on ratemds.com. All right, I'll get back to the chat in a second, but I guess while we're talking about the environment and macro issues, let's do our COVID check-in for this week. So the good news is, if I can find where I saved it, there we go. The COVID curve finally started dropping, and this is due to a moderate drop in the Northeast and a sharper drop in the Southeast. However, the Midwest is still climbing. Midwest and Northeast are both firmly in surge territory. Southeast is still in mid to high territory. West is more in moderate COVID spread territory. But as we showed in the year over year in last week's stream, this is highly unusual for this time. Usually by now, it's already in a lull, or it's already dropped way further than this. So this seasonal pattern is, here, go ahead and put up the one that from last week. You can see there the year over year. And normally by this time, the COVID is way down. For it to still be increasing means we're in uncharted waters. This is an unprecedented pattern for this time of year. And usually there's a big spike in December, January. And then by late February and early March, it's basically over. Well, it's nowhere near over. So we don't really know where this is going to go from here. But it is concerning. Again, a bit of good news that it has started to drop. Hopefully in a month it will be back in that lull. This thing is not going away. And, you know, we talk about how last year COVID was the number 3 leading cause of death, and it contributed to the number 1 and number 2 diseases, which are heart disease and cancer, because SARS-2 damages the heart and it damages the blood vessels. It causes clotting disorders. It causes inflammation of the heart itself. It can also, through the clotting, cause like deep vein thrombosis and things like that, which is clots that form in the deep veins, and then they dislodge, travel through the circulatory system, and then you know, if they get lodged in the heart, they can kill you. So yeah, not a good thing. But as far as let me find it. Yeah, but as far as today's little tidbit, this is from Rajiv Jayadevan. Brain fog reduces IQ by 3 or more points, according to a NEJM study. Caucus. That is New England Journal of Medicine. Earlier, more severe bouts of COVID are linked with greater decline in cognition, and these declines are easy to miss without dedicated testing, and there's links there. So the study is cognition and memory after COVID-19 in a large community sample, and also long COVID and impaired cognition, more evidence and more work to do. So they said there, memory, reasoning, and executive function tasks were had experienced deficits. Those were the largest deficits were in those areas: memory, reasoning, and executive function. Executive function is kind of a basket of skills related to goal setting and carrying out tasks in sort of a step-by-step order, so planning and things like that. And so, yeah, COVID brain fog drains 3 to 6 IQ points from more than a year. So if you think that's no big deal and you want to just see your intelligence go down and down, keep getting fucking COVID, because that's what it's doing. It is attacking your brain. It's causing inflammation throughout your whole body. It's knocking out your immune system by killing your T cells. It's causing heart damage, pancreatic damage, liver damage, kidney damage, on and on. So, waste your brain. Like, who cares, right? I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake the fuck up that we need to stop spreading this disease. This isn't the flu. It is hollowing out people's health. And let me add as well, HIV. On average, HIV takes it can lead to AIDS patterns emerging in a few months, but the average time is like 5 to 10 years. Well, how far are we into this pandemic? What are the long-term effects of catching COVID? We don't know. We don't know. We know it has some HIV-like effects in terms of its killing of T cells. And just to review that, by the way, because we haven't looked at that in a while, but here we go. Well, there's a New York Times article, how the coronavirus short-circuits the immune system. But that actually wasn't the one that I was looking for. Nope, and that's even another one. About the neuropsychiatric sequelae or consequences of HIV, HSV, SARS coronavirus 2, and Ebola. There we go, that's the one. So this is quoting an immunologist named Katzenbach, quote, "Individuals who are infected with COVID have many fewer T cells. That's a problem for us because T cells are a really important part of our immune system that helps us to defend against infection. But at least 3 studies show COVID-19 actually kills off a significant number of the body's T cells. So even when someone recovers from COVID, they're at a heightened risk for other viral, bacterial, and fungal infections. Quote, that is causing a lot of people to go to the emergency rooms, rightly so, to seek medical aid, and it is overwhelming our healthcare system," said Katzenbach. "The only other virus that attacks and kills T cells is HIV, which causes AIDS." To be clear, nobody's equating COVID's impact on T cells to what HIV did to immune systems before effective retroviral treatments were developed. But COVID-19 does eliminate a significant number of T cells, enough to make large numbers of sick people overwhelm emergency wards with RSV, pneumonia, strep infections, and other ailments. Quote, "With the loss of these T cells, we are now more vulnerable to all these other infections, other viruses, other bacteria. They are getting in and causing disease, and often more severe disease than what we might have seen previously." She said that COVID-19 sparks what is called programmed cell death or apoptosis among T cells. Cells in the human body do this naturally as they age, but COVID-19 causes healthy T cells to die that would otherwise be available to fight off infections. Quote, "The fallout from all of this is more secondary infections, more extreme infections, and mortality, or people dying because of these infections." That's what mortality means. So yeah, for people who don't know, as far as HIV and AIDS, HIV is a virus, AIDS is a syndrome that it causes. A syndrome is a collection of symptoms. So what you get, AIDS is acquired immune deficiency syndrome. What you get is usually after a number of years, your immune system gets hollowed out where run-of-the-mill infections are just feasting on your body and eventually kill you because you just don't have an immune system to fight them off. So again, what are the long-term impacts of COVID? We don't know because it hasn't existed for a long term yet. And so all the just chuckle fucks like rolling the dice on this, it's incredibly risky, it's incredibly harmful. All right, let's take a break for a moment there, and let's go. I do have some other stuff I would like to follow up with this week for articles, but let us, actually, I'm going to move this around in my notes just to prepare for later. Covered a lot of that stuff left over from last week. And okay, we're pretty good. Still got stuff to cover. Continuing with the chat. I'm thinking Aaron Bushnell's immolation was an example of a lone person. There must be more who oppose this but lack courage to act or stay in the military due to financial desperation. Yeah, no, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are not happy with what is going on as far as the genocide that Israel is doing in Palestine, and the U.S.'s direct enabling of it. I think that Bushnell was an extraordinary individual as far as being very principled and very organized. And I mean, like, before he did his protest, and by the way, if you see the footage of that, like, there's a guy on fire and there's a cop pointing a gun at him like he's about to shoot at him. If that doesn't just illustrate American policing, like, in a nutshell, you're going to point a gun at a guy on fire. I don't know what does. But he also deleted Signal before he did that so that his, people that he was in contact with wouldn't get brought down by that. So could I share that one Linktree URL with the reading recommendation list you mentioned some streams ago? Do you mean Capitalism and Disability? I'll share it again. I shared it on the... so it's linktr.ee/capitalism and disability. I'll put it in the chat right now. Is that the one you're talking about? I did put it on the community post a while back. Well, thank you. Here to support each other. You know, I've been having a hard time, especially since the Palestine thing. Goddamn KKE, consistently blowing that one position on same-sex adoptions and the, quote, fraternal maternal family structure. Yeah, I don't know. Why is there no international Communist Party? That's a huge question. Why isn't there a Communist International? Well, that ended in 1943. Allegedly, we're actually talking about that in the ongoing series on the channel. If you want to check out the series that begins with the video, what's the title? Introduction to First Wave USA Anti-Revisionist Playlist with notes from the Marxist Internet Archive. So it's like the last 5 videos. That's the new series. And so we talk about that. So the Communist International was deleted in World War II. The official reason for it was that all of the different countries in there were like on their own path and didn't make sense for a Comintern anymore. I think that's a hopelessly awful reason. And it seemed to me more like concessions to the imperialist powers of the Allies. That's my own personal sense of it. That could change because I'm not an expert on it, but that was my takeaway for now. But yeah, officially, according to the Comintern, it was just like it achieved its objectives and each country was going to go off and do its own thing. It just seems like terrible logic. And then from there, I mean, World War II, I think, had such a deleterious effect on the international communist movement. It just was never really able to recover. And we have to kind of, I think, do the whole fucking thing over again. So, I mean, there's a really nutshell version of it, but so many people are cosplaying as socialists. It's tiring and demoralizing. Best advice is if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. Goes for all of us. We've got to take the fight back out there. You know, it's an election year, and, you know, I said at the time I supported the Bernie Sanders thing because it did give the left some breathing room to do what we did, and S4A came out of that. And when you have an election like this one, where it's just people rallying around Biden, they're just coming from a place of fear and tension, and they don't want to expand possibilities that really challenge the system more. And you see that because it means for them getting involved in something that is, they're reacting more to Trump and bad things, and they're too scared to change the system or try to. unless they just get really like hopeless and just drop out of it because there's not really anything organized. I say just drop out because there's not really much organized stuff for them to get involved in. We're just in a bad, I hope that this clears up in a few years and some more, we go on the offensive again, let me put it that way. But I think this year is going to be pretty rough for that. Only the most hardcore of people are going to be able to sort of withstand, getting sucked into that but Trump thing. And, it's not a real good year for left expansion, again, except among the more hardcore, I guess you could say, who probably were most of the way there already. So I don't know. But we'll keep doing what we're doing and keep listening to what people are saying and keep taking that temperature so that we can respond with messaging accordingly. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like Biden's the candidate, and even in the primary stage, Biden's the candidate. And so most of the momentum is around timid and frightened Democrats, pulling the, if you don't vote for him, you're voting for Trump. It's a really bad position to be arguing, or it's a really bad situation to be arguing for kind of more expansion of the left and to be sort of testing boundaries and pushing out further into left growth. I mean, the left organizations that are there are going to do that. I think that a lot of the left that was already established prior to this year is going to resist Biden. And so we need to keep that messaging going. But again, it's not a particularly hopeful cycle where somebody's out there going, we can do more, and there's crowds of people, like Bernie Sanders was rallying stadiums full of people in city after city. Now, he ended up being a shitty social fascist, but he was at least talking about things that represented some leftward movement and broad popular reforms. And you had people, again, rallying by the stadium full for that and just imagining that, even independently of Bernie per se. They just started going, yeah, we, whether or not that includes Bernie, we could do these things. And so you just had people thinking more about what was possible. But in an election year like this, people are not really thinking about what's possible. They're thinking about how much they hate Biden and Trump alone. So it's I think somewhat less of that, imagining a world beyond this, but we do need to emphasize that messaging as well. So, but as far as reestablishing the Comintern, keep in mind where the first Comintern came from. So it was the Third International, the Third, Communist International. So it was coming on the heels of a very well-organized Second Socialist International, which went opportunist. And then the Russian Revolution happened, and so you had the first nationwide victory for a communist Marxist party, forming the Third International to Bolshevize all the other parties. I mean, that's not a situation we're in right now. What you have is a lot of people that are study groups, that are some parties that may have some ties to the labor movement in their country. But there's not like this kind of roaring victory starting another international. And then China, ostensibly the largest Marxist-Leninist state in the world, is not doing anything like that either, really. So, yeah. The U.S. has destroyed my country because they did not want to pay 10 cents more for 5 pounds of sugar. Exactly. Also, for people interested in the annexation of Hawaii becoming a U.S. state, look at the Dole Fruit Company. It's like pineapples. So, yeah, they do that. Don't we already have 50 communist internationals made by Trotskyists already? Yeah, the Trotskyists were about the fourth international. And then they literally wound up making, by the late 90s, more fourth internationals than there were even Trotskyist parties. At least in the UK. I'll go ahead and put it on the screen for you. There you go. We've shown this before. The number of British Trotskyist groups in Fourth Internationals, 1950 to 2017. And I think recently, as of the late 20-teens, the number of British Trotskyist groups slightly outpaced the number of Fourth Internationals. But you got about 24 Fourth Internationals and they're Trotskyist, and we're not so into that. Does Pelosi honestly expect anyone to believe that the Israelis aren't using U.S. weapons against Gaza and the West Bank? Yeah, I mean, there are Pelosi stands out there. They will believe whatever she says, but there may be, less than 30% of people out there. I don't know. I couldn't believe the cop pointing his gun at Aaron Bushnell and telling him to get on the ground. Maybe he was just telling the fire to get on the ground, because that's how cops fight fire, with guns, let alone anything. Yeah, the warships parked off the coast is a threat of being attacked by the U.S. if anyone dares to intervene in an attempt to stop the genocide. Couldn't be more obvious. I mean, yeah, they basically said as much. I suspect Biden was just bluffing when he said he had hoped to get a ceasefire by Monday. He just wanted to look good before the primaries. I mean, he doesn't really need to look good before the primaries. He's not up against anybody else. Although, by the way, Marianne Williamson did unsuspend her campaign. I watched her video, I think it was last night, maybe 2 nights ago. It's all a blur. Yeah, she said she had suspended her campaign because she was losing the horse race, and she unsuspended it because she just needs to be in the race to stand up for... And then here's where it starts going off the rails. It's like, yes, she wants to stand up against U.S. support for Israel. Then she goes on this long thing about restoring the middle class and all this other just total nonsensical sockdom stuff. And I don't know, maybe I can do a reaction video to that. But Iskra Press is coming out with the historical documents of the Palestine Liberation Organization in 2 books. Oh, that's cool. That is cool. Definitely, can you send me a link when that comes out? Because I'm probably not going to remember. Here, let me open an Iskra Press tab. Press. From the Center for Communist Studies. Oh, I had a link and I just totally... Okay, Iskra Books. Biden said the other night that Jews are only safe in Israel, which means he is saying they aren't safe in the U.S., which is the country with, I think, the 2nd largest Jewish population in the world. What the hell is he even saying? We are the Democrats' enemy. We're their class enemy, absolutely. Makes the complete dogshit system in the UK look remotely representative. Yeah, I mean, if fascism is in part defined by its open disavowal and abandonment of any sort of parliamentary system, the U.S. is well on its way. Regarding the cop and Bushnell, I wanted to be surprised so badly, but it really tracks for them. Just shows how they're trained to respond to anything bad with gun. Democracy is when you can vote for only one candidate, because all other options would be a threat to democracy. Yeah, that's what that's what I was getting at with the whole, we have to vote Democrat. It's like, democracy is in the crosshairs. Well, where were the Democrats this whole time where we got to this point? That's my whole point. The Democrats were in the government. They were shared 50% of the government this whole fucking time. And yet somehow they were unable to stop any of this from getting to this point. Why would you keep supporting them? That's the whole point. And there needs to be some constructive long-term vision, because clearly the system we have now is not sustainable. It is not. Imagine how things globally would be right now if America's armament factories ground to a halt and their military equipment stockpiles dried up. I mean, I think some other G7 country would start becoming the new United States in that respect. Somebody would have to, be the major arms supplier, etc. But, somebody else would fill that role. It just happened to be that after World War II, the United States was ideally positioned for it. I saw you got called a tanky on Blue Sky for calling someone a Democrat. Good stuff. Yep. Yeah, tanky is anyone a liberal doesn't like. I mean, sometimes it's used with a bit more nuance of a revisionist kind of right-wing partnering pseudo-Marxist. But many liberals, it's just literally, if you say anything against Joe Biden, you're a, quote, tanky. It's the stupidest word. They can't bring themselves to say communist, so they say tanky. Yeah, the Dems absolutely facilitate fascism. Absolutely. With liberals like these, who needs fascists? The Democrats passed the laws that the Republicans couldn't pass in the 1990s. They passed the criminal laws reform that made the U.S. the worst of any dictatorship, which jails a large number of people. Yeah. What about choosing the weakest adversary, or is that just a ticket complacency? I mean, I don't know if you can really say the Democrats or the Republicans are weaker in any meaningful way that would help the left. The only thing you can say is that it looks like the left gets bigger sometimes when the Republicans are in office because you have lots of liberals who, if their guy or gal was doing the exact same thing, they would make excuses for it. But because a Republican did it, they are outraged. And this happens every time. So there is a sort of, I do think that the left is growing overall as there are worsening economic conditions and people just get it more and more with increased information spreading through the internet. But also, you have to remember when a Republican's in the White House, it often looks like the left is bigger than it is because a lot of the Democrats pretend that they're staunch opponents of whatever XYZ that the Republicans are doing. However, then when they get in power, they don't actually really do anything about it. Give Biden another term, he will do the same things Trump would. I mean, he's working on it now, yeah. Just let the ship sink, talking about our sinking ship metaphor. I mean, it's going to sink. This is what we know about capitalism. It trends toward a final crisis from which it cannot recover. And we're in a current cost of living crisis with a frozen housing market, sort of like a essential thing. People need housing. If you don't have housing, I mean, most people who are homeless do still work anyway, but, being able to reliably cook your food, and do like take care of yourself, it's much harder. A lot of people are homeless, they will get like a gym membership or something like that so that they can use showers and things like that, but it's so much harder when you don't have your own resources. But still, most homeless people work. But yeah, housing, it's essential. Not having it is so hard, and it can be really hard to get back into housing once you lose it. And the housing market is going off the rails. Joe Biden, the entire Democratic Party, more or less, not making a single noise about it. The median house in the U.S., I think, is $450,000. Just for clarity, that's 415, not 50. But you have to be in like the 90th percentile for income to afford that. You have to be making over $100,000 a year to afford that. It's like over $4,000 a month for the monthly payment. Who can afford that? But yeah, that's where we're at. So the ship is sinking, and we're heading into another crisis. As we covered in last week's stream, Japan and the UK are already officially in recession. Germany is probably next to be labeled officially in recession, and the US has many early signs of a recession. The Conference Board leading index went below negative 4.5%. That is like a bulletproof metric going back to the 50s. Every time it does that, there is a recession. It's the inverted bond yield curve, all kinds of stuff that foretells a recession. People's spare money that they got during the pandemic has dried up. A lot of the holiday spending was put on credit that people can't afford. This year and next, we're going to see the bill come due, and it's going to be super fucking ugly. And there will be a huge correction. And, if it happens before the election, probably guaranteed that Biden will lose. And, if it happens after, those kinds of things spur the growth of the right. Because, again, fascism is capitalism in crisis. So after 2008, we saw the Tea Party, huge growth of the right. And a lot of that's astroturfed. It appears to be grassroots, but it's actually funded by big money. The super rich just making fake grassroots organizations. And that is just going to keep getting worse and worse the more that the global financial crisis resumes. And yeah, I actually wanted to get a graphic. I'm always talking about, if you look at the housing market corrected for inflation. Give me a second here. There was another channel. I watch a lot of housing market stuff now because nobody's talking about the housing crisis really. But let me just get something. So this graphic that's going up on the screen right now, this is from another channel. I think I shared a video or two of theirs. It's like housing market research, Reventure Consulting. Title of the video, The Biggest Mortgage Collapse in U.S. History is Happening Right Now. It's about how demand for new mortgages has like completely collapsed. But the chart that you see on the screen, this is the home price index, inflation adjusted, going back to 1890. The green horizontal line in the middle of the screen is the 130-year average. So where are we? Okay. So if you go back to like 2000, that's where the curve starts going up, all right? And then you get that gigantic peak in 2007, like that's the 2006, 2007 housing bubble, which resulted in, when it popped, and a bubble is widespread overvaluation. So when that bubble popped and values started returning to their historical average, I mean, so many things got wiped out because there was so much speculation going on in the financial system based on that, mortgage-backed securities, and there's all kinds of money tied up in that, bets on bets on bets. Well, when that fell back down to the long-term average, I mean, just it caused the global financial crisis and just wiped out the system. Where are we now? Keep in mind, this is adjusted for inflation. It's even bigger, and it went right back up. We didn't even have a long, protracted period. It basically, in 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012, it got much lower. And then, starting late 2012, early 2013, it started going back up again. And right now, we're on the precipice of probably another 2008 type crash. Once it becomes clear that this is on the way down and it's just not coming back, there's going to be massive sell-off as investors get the fuck out of the market and they try to get cash back for what they're holding. Because the whole game is buy low, sell high. You buy something cheap, and then when the market goes up, you sell it. And it does go cyclically in waves, and so people try to play that. And basically the thing. People also hold things long-term that just appreciate in value. But you get these bubbles. And so 2008, that the global financial crash was preceded by this gigantic housing bubble. And we went immediately back to the same exact type of situation. They can't save the system. It's just been on life support. So is this the final crisis? I mean, we haven't seen anything like this before. Again, this graph goes back to 1890, adjusted for inflation, house prices. So this one, to me, it was like in the cartoons, it's like the Tom and Jerry, where it's like the jaw literally hits the floor and the eyes pop out. That to me was just like, oh wow, so much makes sense looking at this chart. So yeah. All right, continuing with the chat. Half the Dems think that AOC is a political messiah to deliver them from the, quote, bad capitalism, but they'll vote Biden if they have no other choice. I don't even hear people talking about AOC anymore. I don't remember the last time I even saw her in social media or anything. She's just been completely absorbed into the system at this point. We need to get the working class to stop acting against their interests. Well, there's a lot of aspects to that. There's agitation, education, and organizing. That's kind of the classic formula. Agitate, listen to people, amplify their concerns, help them articulate their concerns, which you have to listen to them first. And then educate people about where their concerns are coming from, how they're caused by the system. I always think of that, the meme, let me see if I have it, the one pouring the gigantic bottle of olive oil on the salad, and its problem is capitalism. Looks like I don't have that one, but there you go. I mean, there's all kinds of different the problem is capitalism things. I like the one where it's the smiling guy pouring like a bottle of olive oil that's as big as he is on a salad, and it says me, and then the salad is my conversations with friends, and then the bottle of oil is labeled "The Problem is Capitalism." So yeah, we have to listen to people to see what their concerns are, and then help draw them out, fan the flames of discontent, and then also explain to people, well, that's caused by the system. Capitalism is the problem, and so on, and then convincing people to organize. Getting people involved. I mean, it's not just convincing. It's not this abstract thing. It's inviting people. It's having events people actually want to go to, and so on. It's not just like this abstract, I debated you into submission kind of thing. It's like, I invited you to a fun event, and you met some new people that are politically conscious. And if you have friends who are politically conscious, you're more likely to become politically conscious. So, this whole, like, just debating people, that's not really how it works. And I'm not saying that you thought it was like that, but so many people out there with this idea of you can just win debates to bring about, full communism or whatever. It's just kind of pretty wild. Nothing against wildness, but that's wild parentheses bad. All right, where were we in the chat here? The entire squad has been absorbed. They brought them out in 2019 in a big way. And then when AOC got like reelected and stuff, that was a big deal. It was to quell left activity and left demands. They don't seem to think that they need to do that anymore. And so AOC is just not in the headlines at all. I think it also stopped working to a large extent too. Like, people who are actually on the left don't actually listen to her at all. The AOC sheepdog routine is pretty tapped out by this point. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that they're even bothering with it but again, the left has to. Biden in general is suppressing the left so much, and it's empowering that right wing of the Democrats, where even the left wing of the Democratic Party is awful, but they're really emboldening the right wing of the Democratic Party to just go out there with like the slightest criticism of Biden is like, oh, so you like Trump then? Jesus. It's a really hostile environment for the left is what I'm trying to say. Whereas when you had Bernie Sanders with a foot in the door there, it was a little bit better. Where we could sort of get a word in, around that. All right, so we're caught up with the chat for now. I definitely have a bunch more articles to do, so let's get into that. So we were just talking about the cost of living crisis. There's sort of an amusing article. After backlash, Wendy's now says it will not roll out surge pricing. So basically, Wendy's, the fast food restaurant, burger joint, said a couple of days ago that it was contemplating surge pricing. Like at certain hours of the day, they'd start gouging people for food. And after being lambasted, they decided not to do that. Wendy's is trying to clarify or put a different spin on what its CEO meant when he told investors that the fast food giant would introduce dynamic pricing to its menus. Will this lead, I wonder if they implemented that to people like charting what time of day and like different days of the week and days of the month prices were likely to be high and low, and then like you get this whole sort of like market forces within like the Wendy's burger sphere happening, and then people would like show up at the times when they'd be most likely to. It's so bizarre, but this is where we're at. Is like on the menus, it'll be like in the airports where the numbers of the times of the flights like flip on the board, but it'll be like that for the prices. It'll be like, yeah, can I get like a large fries? And then the price like clicks up, and you're like, wait, take that off, and then you like wait a few minutes, it comes back down. Can I get the fries now? It's like you gotta lock in your price when it's low. Anyway, surge pricing is not in the cards, the company now insists. During the February 15th earnings call, Wendy's CEO Kirk Tanner said, beginning as early as 2025, we will begin testing more enhanced features. Wow. Like, that's a feature. Like that's something I enjoy the new features at Wendy's. Like they really screw me over at certain times of day. And day part offerings. What is a day part offering? Along with AI enabled menu changes and suggestive selling? Is this English? Like what kind of fucking as we continue to show the benefit of this technology in our company operated restaurants, franchisee interest in digital menu boards should increase, further supporting sales and profit growth across the system, Tanner told investors. That is fucking crazy. Anyway, so that was the plan, and now they're saying that they're not going to do that anymore. The Wendy's cinematic universe going crazy. Yeah, that's fun. What else do we have going on? Oh, in related news, so this is out of the Guardian, Australia. There's no way to budget yourself out of the cost of living crisis for low-income earners, a report finds. So this is inequality reporting by Kate Kelly, and this is from earlier this month. Many participants struggled to afford basics, cutting back on food or rationing medication, a survey suggests. And so the idea that you just need to budget, you just need to tighten your belts, austerity, shared sacrifice, is increasingly difficult due to the cost of living crisis. The author of the report, Dina Bowman, says. Yeah, because, at a certain point, you just can't cut costs anymore when you're down to just buying essentials. So the article says people experiencing poverty and job insecurity are increasingly unable to budget their way out of financial crisis, a new report from the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence has found. The research, which asked 40 low to middle income Victorians to detail their finances over 10 weeks, found inadequate income support, insecure work, and the cost of living crisis are driving inequality across Australia. So there's this belief, the quote that they had, it's become more and more difficult to tighten your belt, the old Bill Hicks joke. So I'd like to tighten my belt around a right-wing politician's neck when they say that. Many participants struggled to afford the basics. They borrowed money or delayed paying a bill. They cut back on food or heating. They rationed medication, or in some cases, they moved regionally to try to save some costs, although in large swaths of the United States, that is not an option. Like a lot of the Midwest, just kind of the middle. If you divided the U.S. into thirds, sort of like west, middle, and east, the west and the east are just, people are priced out. Like people are pretty much stuck where they are. In the middle corridor, like Texas up through the Midwest, there's a lot of lower prices there. But yeah, the two coasts and a significant portion of inland territory from there are just totally frozen. There's no housing inventory. And so, moving regionally to try to save some costs. I mean, I actually, I have definitely moved a couple of times in the past to places where I was able to save money in the new place versus the old place where I lived. Just everything was cheaper. Gas was cheaper. Food was cheaper. And significantly so. I was like, wow, I'm saving so much money. And it's like, no matter where you go now, you would have to really move to just specific states and entire regions of the country are out at this point because the across the board cost of living crisis is so bad. So anyway, Parliamentary Budget Office costings commissioned by the Greens showed that the lowest 40% of income earners will receive just 9% of the benefits from the reshaped Stage 3 tax cuts. Jeremy Paxson, the policy officer for the Australian Unemployed Workers Union, said that it was sickening that the government was offering no relief to people on Job Seeker who are living on $46 a day. Quote, has the government forgotten that people on income support exist? Has it forgotten that they vote? Has it forgotten that they still can organize for revolution? So anyway, we need a strong commitment to addressing poverty and disadvantage. I think you're not going to really see that for the rest of the system. I think it's going to be much more often than not just a fascist assault against people. Maybe when the crash comes, there will be some amount of temporary relief, but you look at what they did after 2008. It was like the Tea Party. They came out with the fascist shock troop berserkers, and they just kind of leaned into austerity, and that was kind of like the narrative. And you look at like what happened with Greece, for example, in Europe, there was like whole countries kind of scapegoated. So, yeah. Now, continuing on this whole thing with the economy, saw an interesting article. Somebody was asking recently what were my thoughts about a smaller anti-revisionist party. And so here's an article from the New Worker. This is the official publication of the Communist Workers Platform USA. I understand that they are a splinter group, if I have this correct, from the PCUSA, Party of Communists, or Party of Nazballs USA, which in turn was a splinter group off of CPUSA, the revisionist, the Communist Party of the United States. And people initially largely welcomed PCUSA splitting off from it. However, they've turned out to be, if you could be, even worse, or worse in a different way. Whereas CPUSA often acts more like a caucus of the Democratic Party. And this is why I have, taken some ire from people from some people anyway, for recommending at this point, just if you want to get active, join DSA over CPUSA, because if you're going to be involved in an organization that's going to be doing liberal stuff, at least join one that isn't doing liberal stuff while pretending to be Marxist-Leninist. That's just going to confuse you. Also, DSA is a lot bigger and a lot more active. And I've seen them do real-world stuff that helps in, they've been involved in a number of actually useful campaigns. CPUSA, much smaller, more under the radar. So yeah, PCUSA, then they had a couple of splinter groups, including the ACB, American Council of Bolsheviks, PCUSA, Party of Nazballs USA, sued them in federal court for like hundreds of thousands of dollars for disparaging their good name. It's politics. They broke off. What do you want? That is Fed behavior, in my humble opinion, to be suing communists for hundreds of thousands of dollars in court. And that helps absolutely no one. But then again, Party of Nazballs, they do all of the pro-Dugin stuff, prominent Russian fascist and imperial theorist. So what else would you really expect? Anyway, that is, I believe Communist Workers Platform USA is a splinter group. At least I hope they are, or this entire little sidebar that I did has nothing to do with anything. But still, hopefully useful anyway. So here's an article, China's Stock Market, a lesson on what socialism is not. So this is from, boy, that's too small, earlier this month. And is that Charles Andrews? I'm sorry, the text is too small on my screen and I can't give proper credit, but hopefully that's Charles Andrews. So let's go on to the next screen now. This is a super smooth presentation. I should win an award. Late in January, the Chinese government arranged for its state-owned companies to put as much as $282 billion into the failing stock market, or falling stock market, same difference. The companies were told to buy via Hong Kong accounts. The government is desperate to halt a big slide in the Shanghai Composite Index, which had fallen nearly to its March 2020 low point at the start of the COVID pandemic. Why does a, quote, socialist economy have a stock market? Since Deng Xiaoping and crew yanked China off the communist path and onto a capitalist trajectory, the factories, construction sites, and other means of production have become private property. China says its socialist market economy has two parts, a private sector and a state sector. However, nearly all the means of production are the property of corporations. Ownership resides in shares of stock. This is the setup for state-owned corporations as well as private ones. A government holding company typically owns most of the stock of a state-owned firm, but all the big ones have put 5 to 15% of their shares on stock exchanges in Shanghai and Hong Kong. It cannot be otherwise in a capitalist economy. This means the means of production, physical things, are owned by one or another person or group of persons. This is a social claim that persons are free to trade for some other claim. The division of ownership into shares and the ability to transfer and exchange shares are necessities in a capitalist economy. There's been a lot of talk about financialization and its growth over the last 30 years. However, financial reflections and distortions of reality have been around as long as there have been significant capitalist ownership in things. A tulip mania occurred in Holland from 1634 to 1637. People bought and sold contracts to buy a tulip on margin, partial payment owing the balance upon the agreed delivery date of the bulb. The price of tulips went to fantastic heights and then crashed to nothing. People buy shares of stock to make money. Corporations pay dividends out of their profit. As the profits of a corporation grow, the price of its shares tend to increase. Shareholders gain on their investment. Underneath this scramble is the labor of the working class, which makes it all go. Workers operate the means of production and repair their breakdowns, producing the food, clothing, housing, schools, healthcare, and new means of production that are the real wealth of a society. Capitalist property, including shares of corporate stock, is a lock on this wealth. When invested capital grows faster than profit does, the value of the capital shrinks. In stock market terms, share prices go down. For many years in China, it was the opposite. The working class was so thoroughly exploited, and the number of workers was so enlarged by peasants forced into migrant wage labor that profits grew and grew. Capitalist booms inevitably collapse, as Marx explained, by the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. The Chinese economy is not doing well today. There's some bullet points. 1. A big real estate bubble has burst. Quote, by some estimates, Chinese cities now have 65 million to 80 million empty apartments. Some are developers' unsold inventory. In addition, people bought and expected to flip 1, 2, and even dozens of empty condos on speculation. Rents are too low for people to bother being a landlord. 2. Foreign corporations have piled into the country since the early 1990s, eager to share in the exploitation of low-wage labor. But Chinese capital has mounted a challenge, and the government has made life more difficult for foreign businesses. The influx of global capital has slowed. Companies move production to Vietnam, India, and Mexico, and profits garnered in China are taken out of the country instead of being reinvested there. 3. The labor force is shrinking. Fewer new workers arrive from the countryside. Working-class families in the cities find it impossibly burdensome to raise and educate children. Retirements outnumber the entry of new youth into the labor market. Does any of this sound familiar? Yeah, I mean, it should. Anywhere that does advanced monopoly capitalism is going to have these characteristics. The rise of share prices has turned into a fall, and it is not clear where it might stop. The government responds with a campaign to push the stock market back up. The self-styled, quote, communist regime has not been candid about why the Shanghai Composite Index of share prices matters so much. One motive might be to attract foreign investment, on People's Republic of China terms, at a time when the economy is in a slump. Some 212 million retail investors own stock. Although their total holdings are small in the economy, severe price falls are painful to many of them. Another reason might be the government's new retirement system. The Chinese equivalent of U.S. Social Security is not sufficient to live on. Consequently, workers must try to save enough for their retirement. This gave employees with higher salaries a motive for speculating in real estate, a game that is now over. Instead of figuring out how to guarantee adequate Social Security, the government has begun to push people into investing in mutual funds of stocks and bonds, very much like 401k and other retirement savings accounts in the U.S. In December 2022, China even granted Fidelity Instruments, the gargantuan brokerage and mutual fund operator, regulatory approval to sell mutual funds in China. Whatever the motives, the government spends billions purchasing stocks in an attempt to get the share prices up. The sight is ridiculous. For all the admiring Western publicists who chatter about the state holding the commanding heights of the economy, about the political power of the Communist Party over private capitalists, a, quote, socialist market economy can no more have controlled capitalism than a woman can become a little bit pregnant. That, by the way, is where this started to turn. When I was naive on this question, I gave China a lot more credit. I do know people in China, and even what they were describing sounds way advanced compared to the U.S. Just their leftover remnants of socialism, like being able to elect a manager or stuff like that, or just other stuff about how their local governments work, sounds like light years ahead of the U.S. The question is, they have been restoring capitalism for a number of decades now, which is demonstrably growing over time. That cannot be curtailed forever, its effect on the politics and everything else. And so it's like, where does that end up in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? And how do you turn that around? Can you turn that around without a second revolution? So, continuing, the alternative is socialism, which takes the road to communism. There is no capitalist property in the means of production. There are no capitalists, no stock shares, and no share prices. An overall plan allocates all investments. In the 1930s, the Soviet Union proved that a planned economy works. Since then, studies of its triumphs, but also its problems, have shown how to combine essential planning with initiative in each firm. To the capitalists of the United States and the, quote, communist capitalists of China, we say, we can run it better for our needs and for the earth. So yeah, that is by Charles Andrews, and editor's note, they invite you to check out the Communist Workers Platform USA. I don't know that much about that group, but let me know what you find out. Okay. Oh, I gotta just catch my breath here for a second. I've been streaming a lot today. What else do we have coming up? So continuing on the economy stuff, a couple of articles here. Let's start with some right-to-work stuff. So recently, I don't have a screenshot, unfortunately, but just a week or so ago, the U.S. state of New Hampshire defeated right-to-work laws being initiated. So that's good news. And I saw somebody asking, how can right-to-work stuff be defeated once it, if you're already living in a right-to-work state, how do you do it? Well, here's an example of Democrats actually not being totally useless for once, although I'm sure that the inside track, would tell a different story as far as the fight to get this done. So last year, Michigan became the first state in decades to repeal the right-to-work laws. So it's kind of hard to explain, especially to people in other countries, what this is. I'm not sure if there's comparable stuff in many places, but anyway, the U.S. after World War II passed the Taft-Hartley Act, which was a massive anti-labor bill after World War II. And basically, it made sweeping changes to industrial relations, including making the closed shop illegal. So a closed shop is one where the union basically controls the hiring. So in order to work there, you have to join the union. That's a closed shop. So it made that illegal. This broke union power to a huge extent. Now, there could be problems with that as far as if the union was discriminatory, then you wouldn't be able to get a job there if you were in one of the groups that the union was discriminating against. But more radical unions like the IWW, which was very anti-racist at a time when a lot of unions were very racist, their slogan, or one of their slogans, was a closed shop and an open union, for example. But I would encourage people interested in, getting involved in efforts to repeal right-to-work laws, which is a step toward unchaining the U.S. labor movement. Because right-to-work encompasses things like that. It's like further restrictions on what unions can and can't do, building off of Taft-Hartley type stuff. If you're interested in that, look up this article and others. Michigan becomes first state in decades to repeal right-to-work law. It's from PBS NewsHour. And you can find a lot actually written about this subject, but would love to see that going on in more states across the country. Again, we need to, if you want to see a resurgence of the left, you've got to have a resurgence of the labor movement as a militant anti-capitalist movement. The influence of communists within the labor movement must grow. The movement itself must grow. That's really key because those are the primary organizations for proletarian class organizing, labor unions. So got to get that going, and repealing some of the anti-union laws wherever you can. I mean, unless, the people in your area, workers in your area are, totally fine with waging illegal union struggles. That's a thing you can do also, but riskier and, harder to get people involved in an effort like that. But another sort of direct shop floor related thing, this is an article out of Ars Technica. RTO, or return to office, doesn't improve company value, but it does make its employees miserable. This is a study, and it says data are consistent with bosses using return to the office to reassert control and scapegoat workers. This is from This Week by Beth Mole. And again, small text. If that's Malay, I apologize. I can't see an accent on there. But let's get into this deleterious effects of returning to the office after work from home. For some time, having to work from home during the COVID-19 pandemic was stressful. Parents balanced job duties while caring for children. Some struggled to set up a home office and adjust to new tools like video conferencing. Lonely workdays at home added to social isolation. The line between work and life blurred. For others, working from home was a boon. Comfort, convenience, flexibility, no commuting or rush hour traffic, no office environment distractions. I'll add less getting dressed up. When the acute aspects of the pandemic receded, some who at first struggled began to settle into a work-from-home groove and appreciated the newfound flexibility. Then, bosses began calling their employees back to the office. Many made the argument that the return-to-office policies and mandates were better for the companies. Workers are more productive at the office, and face-to-face interactions promote collaboration, many suggested. Many who, I guess, have never been in an office. But there are few data to support that argument. Pandemic-era productivity is tricky to interpret, given that the crisis disrupted every aspect of life. Research from before the pandemic generally suggested that remote work improves worker performance, though it often included workers who volunteered to work from home, potentially biasing the finding. Although still, if that's allowed, I mean, that's the result. So anyway. For a clearer look at the effect of return-to-office policies after the pandemic, two business researchers at the University of Pittsburgh examined a sample of firms on the S&P 500 list. So these are the biggest companies on the stock market, 137 of which had return-to-office mandates and 320 that clearly did not between June 2019 and January 2023. The researchers collected publicly available data on each company, including financial data and employee reviews. They then looked at what factors were linked to whether a firm implemented a return-to-office policy, like the company's size, financial constraints, and CEO characteristics, as well as the consequences of the return-to-office mandates, employee satisfaction, and financial metrics of the firms. Overall, the analysis, currently released as a preprint, so not yet reviewed, found that return-to-office mandates did not improve a firm's financial metrics, but they did decrease employee satisfaction. Drilling down, the data indicated that return-to-office mandates were linked to firms with male CEOs who had greater power in the company. Wow. Here, power is measured as the CEO's total compensation divided by the average total compensation paid to the 4 highest paid executives in the firm. Okay, so in other words, firms with more of a traditional patriarchal situation where there's more inequality and a male head of the company that has disproportionate amounts of power, those were the companies most likely to do this because, not in my house and all that kind of stuff. Before the analysis, the researchers hypothesized that return-to-office mandates may be used to blame employees for poor firm performance, but companies that have institutional ownership, like hedge funds or endowments, would not fall for such a blame game, and would thus be less likely to implement a return-to-office mandate. The data supported those hypotheses. Firms with weaker stock performance before employees were able to return to the office were more likely to enforce return-to-office mandates. However, institutional ownership decreased the probability of return-to-office mandates, because when an institution owns, rather than some rich jerk with a big ego, they don't really care. They just want the company to just keep paying them money. Whereas, again, when you get that sort of patriarchal ego involved, that's where this was more likely to happen. Although CEOs often justified return-to-office mandates by arguing that returning to the office will improve the company's performance, quote, results of our determinant analyses are consistent with managers using return-to-office mandates to reassert control over employees and blame employees as a scapegoat for bad firm performance. Wow. Almost like, yeah, that's exactly how fucking douchebag CEOs tend to act. Amazing. Unsurprisingly, the researchers also found that return-to-office mandates were linked to decreases in employee satisfaction. Shocker. Specifically, after a return-to-office mandate, employees' ratings significantly declined on overall job satisfaction, work-life balance, senior management, and corporate culture. But their ratings of factors unrelated to return to office did not change, indicating that the return to office mandate was driving dissatisfaction. The study has limitations, including a short time frame to look at long-term outcomes of return to office policies and a time frame that overlapped with a labor shortage. worker responses may be different in a tight labor market. I'm not sure that's really going to influence attitudes as much as like, people might be like more grateful on some level to have a job, although having a job should be a right. But people might be like, well, at least I'm not unemployed. But it's not really going to, I don't think, increase their satisfaction per se. It might increase their counting their blessings score, but it's probably not going to increase their satisfaction. Anyway. Still, the study adds some data to the ongoing debate and feuds over return to office policies. Seems completely common sense to me and in line with what I would have guessed there. All right, so I do have some more articles actually that are on a different track, more related to U.S. military stuff. I might save these for another stream. Let's get back into the chat for a minute and see where we end up. Some think with good reason that AOC was a CIA asset, but even if so or not, the same results. Wendy's testing the waters and now pretending they were just kidding, bro. Eat veggies, not Wendy's burgers. I endorse that. Wendy's wants to charge surge prices for their food, but they aren't interested in paying surge wages to staff, heyo, who have to work twice as hard during rush periods. I mean, I don't know. Being a fast food worker is pretty easy. Like, all you have to do is just like hand people food. I mean, it's not even that hard. Like, they say they're exploited, and like they're not. And it's just like it's like an easy job. Okay. Next up, fast food as a subscription service. Stock market menus, let's go. You won't own your burger. You just get the license to take a bite. Yeah, you can just merely like lick your food. Then they built a contraption where it'll clean off the lick part and then it'll be served to someone else. Saw a meme today that was a pic of a Wall Street bro that said, when you buy the Baconator and the dip, short the sandwich and sell for a 27% profit. That's what I'm saying. I didn't understand the day part shit either. Yeah, absolutely. I am gobsmacked that Wendy's thought this was a good idea. That disconnect is just going to keep growing. I already feel like, especially with the Democratic Party, they were bad before the 2010s. In the 2010s, especially with the like Obamacare, when that got passed, the ACA, I was reading it in a physical newspaper, I remember at the time, and I was like, they're doing what? It made no sense. I just kept saying it out loud. And since then, it's just been like, I feel like that they're doing what? I just keep coming back to that with such intensity, I'm going to like wind up blowing a tooth out of my mouth saying it at some point. They're doing what? It just gets worse and worse. It was like when Hillary Clinton got defeated, and then they like blamed Russia the same day. I was like, you said what? You're blaming who? You lost because you didn't campaign. Russia, what? Like, it just blew my mind. It blew my mind. But yeah, I feel like that's the disconnect. It's just going to get worse and worse. I'm trying to build a website. Getting off of Wendy's for a second. I'm trying to build a website for better Marxist discussion. A little like Marxist's Internet Archive with forums and invite only to keep the trolls away. And anyone not ready to learn more about Marxist thought online because I cannot find a good one. I'm curious if you know this has been attempted before. I would honestly point you towards some Discord servers better. Oh, let me add again. We mentioned last time that the Stalin bot, the version of GPT-4 that was trained on the works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. The Stalin bot is in the Red Alexandria Discord server, and if you just search on Red Alexandria Discord server, you should be able to find it. I've talked to Lamo, who runs that, and said that that is fine to mention in the stream. But yeah, I think, the forums and stuff, I mean, there's already Reddit, subreddits, and things like that I'm not sure what the website would bring to it that's not already being done reasonably well in Discord servers. Also, Shakespeare, who is a mod here, has Shakespeare's Rainbow Castle. There's a number of Discord servers doing it pretty well. And there's like Reddit subs and things like that as far as discussion goes. So, you know, I mean, you can try to explain, like, if you were to build a website, what would it add over that? But otherwise, that seems to me like there's some pretty well moderated communities there. So back on Wendy, suggestive selling. I ask you if you want to upsize your meal order, but I slip one shoulder out of my shirt while I'm doing it. Yeah. Loosens my visor. I'm a customer. Yeah, it's like when you bat your eyelashes when you're like, would you like to supersize that? I know Wendy's doesn't supersize, but whatever the fucking equivalent of that is. Did you see the did you see Kellogg's CEO talking about how they plan to make more profit from poor people forced to eat cereal? I did not. Do you have a link? I would definitely cover that. I was eating cereal for dinner years ago, not all the time. Been there, done that. Yeah. I love cereal, but sometimes you want something a little more filling. You know, and as far as every social media site being an actively hostile place for Marxists, that's fine. Bring it on. You know, like I said, I my Blue Sky account now exists to devour Democrats. It now exists to consume Democrats. Feed me Democrats. You know, we will one by one take care of all of it and build a communist presence along the way. I feel like my analysis and grasp of Marxism is pretty adequate, and I'd like to start tying historical events together from a communist perspective, but there's so much disinformation, even among the left. Thanks, Trots. I mean, check out history books related to different communist countries. You know, with some research skills training in history, you'll be able to cobble stuff together. You might ask the Finnish Bolshevik. He does videos related to communist history that are original scholarship. So, you know, I was very interested when I started this channel in doing a project about anti-communist, well, just all kinds of anti-communist persecution, oppression, and efforts. I now realize that's like a sweeping project that would be enormous in scope. I mean, you could just on a single country write, you know, a history of anti-communism in that country. But, you know, yeah, that's something I would still love to do an overview on, is overview of anti-communism. I've learned so much history by listening and reading, and I think we must just do what aligns with our Marxist viewpoints, regardless of what was done by others in the past, aside from promoting healthy and strong theory and praxis. We need better propaganda. I feel like the propaganda was like really good a few years ago. Like, so S4A came out of like Facebook shitposting groups. I feel like I don't see, the memes aren't as good anymore, and they're just not as plentiful. We're living in a meme drought, if I do say so myself. But again, part of that came out of like, you know, a few years ago there wasn't Infracell, and there wasn't Jackson Hinkle, and there wasn't like all of that new crop of shit. So, I don't know, things are getting dark, you know what I mean? Like, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. We'll find the openings, but, you know, there's peacetime and there's wartime, I guess. Even in the meme wars, you know. I'm blown away that Trotskyists, or Trotskyites, I will say, are still a thing. Why? It's just a cult of complainers. Indeed. Yeah, so I agree. So this was on the propaganda thing. We have socialism. Well, this was on the propaganda thing. We have S4A and Finnish Bolshevik, but more sensational people are eating up oxygen and turning out to be more about them than the movement. Like I said, I think there's another round of React videos that need to be unleashed. You know, we're going into phase 2 or whatever phase this is. It's phase N+1. We must be vigilant about self-criticism, yet we also must admit that all that energy into constant complaining about leftists doing actual work is sapping energy from our movement. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but I don't know. I'll say the Musk takeover of Twitter was also like a big step backward too. And like Facebook started just flat out banning any kind of socialist, and now Twitter is doing its thing too. So, yeah, no, there's definitely some changes going on. We'll figure it out, but there are changes going on. And yeah, okay, so I was correct. Communist Workers Platform is a splinter from PCUSA. Thank you, Atlas. They were more or less expelled wrongly before the ACB was a thing. The ACB now being defunct, yeah. And yeah, so unfortunately, the ACB, American Council of Bolsheviks, is pretty much dead, inactive. And apparently that lawsuit from Party of Nazballs was a major factor, according to somebody I talked to. Building a party is a lot of work, but it must be done, I agree. The sad thing about the ACB dying is that the line was solid. It's just that the organizational capacity wasn't there, plus the lawsuit, etc. Yeah. I love it that Boeing got destroyed. I love it that Boeing got destroyed because they screwed up their union. What happened there? Somebody have a link on that? I'll cover it in the next stream. Labor is growing, but the leadership can be too easily bought off or swayed. And yeah, we were covering the thing about the Amazon labor union a while back, like maybe in August. We must watch those in power to assure that they don't sell the proletariat out. And yeah, absolutely, because the labor movement is where you get your socialist leaders by and large. So if you don't have like a strong labor movement generating people with a proven history of leading struggle, you're not really going to get the political offshoots of that either. So yeah. But you also need to build into the union structure itself the ability to recall your leaders if they do fuck you over. So there's structural concerns there too. Question, am I following the upcoming IATSE Teamsters negotiations with the film companies? Loosely, if you want to send me a link that would be like really sum it up for the next stream, I'd be happy to look at it. Oh yeah, and then the Teamsters meeting with the Teamsters leader meeting with Trump. Yeah, what's that guy? O'Brien something? Yeah, so there's I'll try to grab this for the next stream. A slap in the face, quoting Workers, says The Guardian. Progressive anger as Teamsters union chief meets Trump. Left-wing members of 1.3 million strong labor union unhappy with Sean O'Brien for private meeting with Trump, the Republican frontrunner. Yeah, I'll try to cover that one in the next stream. Have you seen those outrageous signs put up in offices mocking people having to return to the office? No, I have not. Jesus. That's like harassment. As a courtesy clerk and a cashier, it's not that easy. Imagine having to juggle chainsaws that can talk to you. It's like that. Yeah, I was totally kidding. I have done that job, so yeah, I'm well aware. Russia made Hillary lose is on par with they hate us because of our freedom. Absolutely. Yeah. Except I'd say it's more original than they hate us because of our freedom. Like, that's kind of, like, that's, I totally agree. It's an outlandish, just absurd, ridiculous thing to say. But it's at least more in line with what the Republicans have been saying, like, forever, and you would expect them to say. Russia made Hillary lose is such, like, a batshit, I just dropped like 20 tabs of acid kind of take. Like, where are you getting that from? It's so bizarre. So, anyway. Such a bizarre, like, it's just so, how did you come up with that? It's just, I don't know. Again, Republicans will say somewhat predictable things. Like, they're outrageous, but they're predictably outrageous. The Democrats coming up with just some wild, wild shit because they have to spin it as reasonable. And that's where the fun really begins. Herder fast food jobs are supposed to be for high schoolers, despite when I go there at 1 p.m., a sad widowed old man is taking your drive-through order, barely scraping by. Absolutely. Same cliche, it was Russia reaction when Brexit went through in 2016. Utterly mental. Yeah, just totally unsupportable. We live in a concierge economy. There's not enough consideration toward those doing the deliveries. They're still underestimated as to their importance and are not paid or treated well. Absolutely. I mean, this whole thing of like delivery based on apps, like whether it's Uber Eats or just all of the kind of things where you can get real world service through an app in your phone. This is like brand new. And obviously, those people do not have people working in those jobs do not have the prestige or anything like that, nor is it really recognized. People are being forced into these jobs because they're like the only jobs people can find in a lot of places. And yeah, there's going to have to be like a huge fight about that. So hugely untapped, I think, potential as far as what people working in those positions are feeling and experiencing. Okay, we got a link here. Even sock dems like Crystal Ball reacted on this. I forgot what this is, so I'm opening it to see. Come on. Ooh, this is being slow today. All right. Come on, I see an old guy's face. Oh, Kellogg's CEO suggests cereal for dinner to save money. That's outrageous. Come live in the United States, the country where you must eat cereal for dinner to get by. Hey, the new American dream. And yeah, I was kind of thinking of the Jakarta method about anti-communist oppression. Like, yeah, you can write an entire book about one country. I would love to see a book that does like an overview of like the entire history of anti-communism. Like, we're working on the history of Marxism. Love to see one on anti-Marxism. All right, I'm kind of trying to catch up with the end of the chat here because I should probably wrap up. But I said before, I'm thinking about starting a boycott or protest against a state fair for profiting off of the ignorance of Americans to U.S. history. The fairgrounds were used as a Japanese internment camp in World War II. They still operate every year to this day and don't acknowledge it. Let me know if you got anything going. I will help shine a light. God, it's so depressing to see that Breaking Points with Crystal Ball has 1.2 million subscribers. This is where people are still, their thinking still is. Ways to save: skip breakfast, then cereal for supper. Just sad. S4A needs to sell out already like the Deprogram boys. Working on it. I just haven't worked out my path to selling out yet. I want it to be breathtaking. I want it to be really profoundly upsetting for everyone when I do sell out. So I'm still plotting that. I will say I do have this year's April Fool's joke already worked out. So, all right, I think that's about it for today. Happy to see there's 60 people in here. I saw there was 70 at one point, but yeah, we're 3 hours into the stream and sustaining 60 people, and I think we just had that one troll, so not bad. Pretty good stream, and I was able to catch up on basically everything I wanted to catch up on. I do have a little section about the U.S. military that I didn't get to today, but we'll just do that the next time. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but we did in the last stream or a couple of streams ago something about Food Not Bombs, an activist group that just feeds people. And yeah, a lot of times it's homeless people, but you don't have to be homeless. It's just food. It's free food. They were getting ticketed. This was down in Texas, if I recall correctly. They won their injunction. Oh, I actually got a screenshot of this. It's amazing. I got a screenshot of this. That's what I was doing before. I can't even remember. Did I cover this or not? Anyway, here it is again. A huge win. Judge orders Houston to stop ticketing Food Not Bombs for feeding the homeless downtown. Yay. So this was 2 weeks ago. And so they won their case. So that's really good news. And a follow-up, thank you to the viewer who sent this in. I can't remember who that was, but thank you for that. And see here, we're following up on it. So anyway, that is that. And let's just thank the patrons again. Patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. And yeah, a lot of support. As this continues to grow, I think we're at like 170 supporters. At some point, you can only shrink the font so much. I'll have to add a second screen. Still haven't figured that out yet, but I'll figure it out. I mean, I already have some room where I can put, you see down on the 50 to 99 and the 100, I put them on the same line. I can do that on the other one, so that'll buy like another 20 names or so. We'll keep going. Probably when I hit like 220 or so, when we hit 220, because it's a community, although I'm the one making the graphic. But when we hit that number, probably I'll have to do something with a second screen, but we'll figure it out. I'm not so sophisticated. No, I deliberately like to keep the video really low tech. But, for moving graphics, who the hell does that? I like having just a screen. It's real easy to keep track of. But anyway, we'll figure it out after we get above 200, 220. Got to make room for all the names. We'll figure something out. But really appreciate that. And I kind of like how it's shaping up as just this collage of like spatters of color here and there. That is the S4A supporting community. And, getting all choked up. Really, really appreciate the support. It's great to have been in contact with so many of you for so long, and still years and years of this to come. That is my plan. So on that note, we're going to end the stream. Thanks again to everybody who showed up and helped to make the stream what it is, and we will see you in the next video.